So let me begin by saying that serving my country in the U.S. Army was a tremendous honor. I learned lessons about life and leadership that I still carry with me to this very day. I learned the importance of discipline and accountability and deepened my own understanding of teamwork and even integrity. But I also want to be very, very clear. As a woman of color, and as an enlisted soldier, I also learned about the structures of power and that I didn't have any. And that lived experience of not having a voice or any power served as a foundation for my career and provided a clear direction for my life. So when I left active duty, my new mission was to create spaces where traditionally marginalized communities could redefine their power and become part of the decision-making process of issues that impacted their lives. It's through the transformation of the concept of power and its application that neglected communities can protect and build political, social, and economic power in a system designed to create inequities. So public policy was my chosen path because it impacts society in both scale and scope. There are opportunities to create social change no matter where you are on the spectrum of policy or where you want to work, whether it's one issue you care deeply about or if it's a variety of issues, be it on the national level or your local neighborhood. There is always more work to be done and there's always ways to make life better. So for me, I knew that a formal education was a way to build my arsenal of knowledge and would help me fulfill my new mission when I left the service. So when I was on active duty, I attended school full-time at night, 4 days a week, on the weekends, all year round. And I used my GI Bill to pursue 3 graduate degrees in public administration, public policy, and urban planning. People will underestimate you, discount you, and make snap judgments about you, all without even knowing you. And I have learned that whatever the reasons may be, it doesn't concern me. My work speaks for itself. So I've learned from each of my positions, and I am so very grateful for the opportunity to serve communities in both Atlanta and New York. The concept of impact is relative because it can be viewed through the lens of both scale and scope, both of which are critical in the policy and political landscape. When I worked for Kasim Reed, I focused on issues from a citywide perspective. When I worked for Congressman John Lewis, I focused on issues specific to Georgia's 5th Congressional District. When I worked for the Black, Latino, and Asian Caucus, I focused on issues relevant to the 26 districts of the caucus members. So in each of those positions, I was able to make an impact. It just looked different in terms of scale and scope. The experience was the honor of a lifetime. I received a phone call notifying me that I was selected to serve as one of 3 presidential nominators. And so while I was still processing that moment, the DNC staff and I dived directly into logistics, lodging, transportation, my own personal speaker tracker, all the different elements that make the DNC come to life. So I was on autopilot through most of the process. Everything just happened so quickly. I really felt the magnitude of that moment after I delivered my speech. I was interviewed off to the side of the stage and I was asked, "What were you thinking during your speech?" And I responded, in my speech I referenced my 11-year-old self, but my 11-year-old self never dreamed this. And in that moment, I turned around and I gestured behind me with a sweeping motion, and I lost my breath. It was the first time I saw the crowd, and that was the moment that I was moved to tears. When I delivered my speech, I wasn't focused at all on the crowd. I was focused on my mission, and that was just to tell my story. And so seeing the crowd from the side of the stage, it so deeply moved me. Diverse, beautiful, and rowdy. It was a reflection of who we are. You know, everyone in America was somewhere in that crowd. And the Democratic Party works to create policies and programs that provide solutions and make America a better place for everyone. And so to be a part of history by submitting Hillary Clinton's name into presidential nomination was surreal. And again, it was the honor of a lifetime. But another important aspect of my DNC experience was the emotional process of sharing my story, which I'd always kept private. I was touched by how many people approached me afterwards or sent me personal messages through social media, sharing how they connected with some part of my journey, whether it was, the lived experience of having two moms, being a veteran, being a woman of color, or being an immigrant. Really, there are so many chapters of my story that are so uniquely American and shared with so many countless others. It was a lesson for me in the power of vulnerability, really, in how we can share who we are and connect with each other by sharing our stories. And really, where else in the world can a child begin life in an orphanage and have the opportunity to share her life's journey on a national stage? Only in America. Around 7 p.m. on election night, I was interviewed at the Javits Center, and I was asked what I would do if Hillary Clinton lost. And I remember telling the reporter a lesson I learned from her 2008 campaign loss, as heartbreaking as that was, is you pick up the pieces and you get back to work. Back in 2008, I was devastated when she made the decision to suspend her presidential campaign. Her loss felt so deeply personal. I'd hoped that she would run again in 2016. And when she went through that process and became the nominee, people thought finally a woman president might really happen. After 240 years, democracy is about to include women. We the people is about to actually include us. And so when Hillary lost, I was angry, I was heartbroken, but you pick up the pieces and you get back to work. And that process looks different for everybody. So after the 2016 election, I knew people who couldn't get out of bed for days. But I also knew people, including myself, who had organizing meetings the same week because our lives were on the line and we had no time to waste. So the key takeaway of the 2016 election was grounded in the same truth as 2008. In life, we will hit low points, but we do what we have to do and keep moving forward. So a key step in the process of moving forward is taking the time to pick up the pieces. Then you rebuild. And I've learned that there is tremendous personal agency and power in that process. And I've also learned that what we rebuild is often stronger than what was broken. Believe in yourself. I explained to a mentee that I spent a great deal of my career hiding behind my credentials and experiences. As a woman of color navigating white male-dominated spaces from the military to the political sphere, unless people knew my resume, there was always a question of my qualifications. Every time I stepped into a room, I had to validate why I was there. And I wish I'd had someone tell me that I was enough, that I didn't need multiple advanced degrees to prove that I was competent, or that I didn't need experience ranging from the grassroots to Capitol Hill to prove that I deserved to occupy political and policy spaces. I made those decisions because I knew my accomplishments and credentials had to be on point to be taken seriously. So for those at the beginning of your career, believe in yourself. For women of color, every day we have to navigate a society that tells us we're not enough. In those moments of uncertainty and self-doubt, know that your skills and expertise have prepared you to succeed. And also understand your worth is not rooted in any job title or salary, but rather in recognizing your own value without condition. So regardless of degrees, certificates, or awards, know that you are enough. The concept of community development is the thread that connects all my work in the nonprofit and government sectors. Up until this point in my career, I've always approached community development through the policy lens by focusing on social justice or economic issues. For example, what policies will produce more equity in education, healthcare, or criminal justice reform? Urban planning is the next step in the evolution of my career because it expands my understanding of what community development means and how I can work in a familiar space but just in a different way. And it's also really important to recognize that urban planning is more than just a profession or a field. It creates the political, social, and economic geography of our cities. It determines where affordable housing is built versus luxury housing, or where schools or grocery markets are located, all of which impact our communities and our social networks. That's important because the physical built environment has a significant impact on our everyday lives. To that end, I was intentional about building my arsenal of knowledge by learning the language and technical aspects of urban planning and examining what community development looked like through a different lens other than public policy. In the spirit of authenticity and vulnerability, I don't know what's next for me, but I do know whatever it is, it will align with the work I have always done, which is using policy and politics as a tool to build communities. And I look forward to using my skills and my expertise to create spaces at the intersections of planning, politics, people, and policy, and centering the needs of marginalized communities throughout New York City.